imperialistic attitudes we have been having. So the first thing we're going to look at is this political cartoon, and we're going to answer some of the questions that surround it, like what statement is the artist making in this cartoon, and what are some of the clues. So the obvious one is Uncle Sam is the very stern, angry-looking teacher with the rod here, and he has a lot of symbolism happening in this picture. We have a Native American back here by the door, and they're reading their ABCs upside down. We have a little Chinese person standing just outside this open door, and remember, open door. Back here, we have an African American who is working as the custodial janitor person, and they have very stereotypical caricatures of the face here. And then over here, we have the proper role model older students who are very nicely dressed and well behaved, and they're all reading their books. But if you read the titles of the books, it says things like California, Texas, etc. These are all of the states and how they've been molded into the proper models. And then the naughty little children in the front, also very caricature-esque, which is a negative stereotype. We have Cuba right here, Puerto Rico, Hawaii, and the Philippines. And if you look at their faces all have different expressions, but they're all negative expressions. So we have Puerto Rico looking frightened and scared, Hawaii looking petulant, Cuba looking also angry and kind of petulant, and so are the Philippines. So they're kind of also showing you these attitudes that these US territories have towards us and what we have promised them or didn't promise them. And the title is School Begins. Also, if you were to look at the back here and see what they're talking about, they're also talking about how England was, governed, the New England colonies, and then they kind of go on to explain why the world civilizations rose and we have the right to do that. And then, as I said before, with the Chinese person and the open door, this is a reference to the open door policy, how we wanted to have trade with China and go to trade in China, but we also wanted to exclude them from our own country. We did not want the Chinese here in our land. The Native American reading his book upside down. Remember how we were sending them to the Indian schools and things like that, but how some of them were resistant to it. And this also looks very unhappy, and he's also removed from the states and things like that. So you can see that we've taken the minority groups that we've already isolated, Chinese, natives, and even the African Americans, and how we keep them in subservient roles. And this is all indicated in this picture. So go ahead and you can answer these on your notes about what comes to your mind when you hear world power. I think about things like domination. I also think things like helping others through monetary means or things like that. And then from the 1790s to the Civil War, the U.S. foreign policy was really one of sort of staying out. We did not have a strong military. We kind of took care of our own things. We were domestically focused. Even with the Monroe Doctrine, we were still focused around our own territories. We do have the concept of manifest destiny and having that right to expand westward, but this is really westward in terms of our own continental U.S., but it will change after the Civil War. Once our economy picks up pace and we have a faster industry that's producing tons and tons of goods, we need markets to help sell them. So that's what's going to happen. One, we needed world markets for goods to sell our surplus to and our surplus agricultural products. The United States is actually still one of the leading countries in producing agricultural goods for the world, and we export still a lot of our things. Although with the current Trump tariffs and things like that, we have slowed down. We also needed new sources of raw materials to use because as we are creating these new inventions, we require new materials to help make those inventions. Things like rubber from the rubber trees to help make tires for cars and things like that. Also, with the growing violence from the labor unions and the pushback they were having about trying to help protect the workers and workers' rights, people thought that if we go overseas and we outsource the labor pool, we can find calmer waters that are more compliant and less resistive. And so talking about that whole concept of Darwinism, we've talked about social Darwinism. Now there's international Darwinism. And some of the things for that are it's one of the strongest to survive, and the US needs to show that it's strong. And we need to show that we're strong in a couple of ways. One, we're religiously strong, we're a strong Protestant Christian nation, and we're going to help go and spread that word to other countries who need to be saved. Two, we are politically strong. We weathered the Civil War, we came out whole again, we are as strong as ever, and we need to go and show that dominance. And three, we are militarily strong and we can compete with Europe and things like that, which at the time were the strong military powers. And now Manifest Destiny will no longer stop at the Pacific Ocean. We are going to go beyond it. We're going to start looking at the islands and countries that surround us. Germany, France, Russia, and even Japan were expanding into Africa and the Pacific Islands, and so we wanted to show that we could compete with them. So think about remember the Boxer Rebellion in China and how the European powers all were playing a part in Chinese government and Chinese trade and the economy, and how the Chinese wanted to get away from that, and they asked the U.S. for helping them, and we did. There are people who advocated for imperialism. One is the missionaries. So the person in charge of this is Josiah Strong, and he argued in his book, Our Country, Its Possible Future and Present Crisis, that people of Anglo-Saxon lineage, i.e. English people that were Protestant, it was our job to go and help spread Christianity and colonize the Western world's ideals. But there are some positives with this. It's not all negative. We had things to offer these small countries that didn't have access. We gave them things like new medicines and medical care, science, technology, things like that that would help those cultures and things like that become healthier and access to things they had been denied before. And many of the missionaries would go to Africa, Asia, and Pacific Islands. However, they did go there with a superiority complex and a racial supremacy. So basically, the white people were awesome. And a lot of churches help support the missions as well as US government's involvement. So these churches became very politically aligned with the US government and helping to elect people who shared their vision and things like that. And in the process, they would also give political support and help with the US involvement. Also, the press at the time, this is where the rise of yellow journalism comes in. So, newspaper and magazine editors would find that they could have better circulation and more readership if they would kind of make the stories more sexy and exciting. So, they would set them in foreign locations and they would talk about the plight of the people and they would show the drama happening, and this would make people want to buy them. The two people most associated are William Randolph Hearst of Hearst Castle, if you have been there, and Joseph Pulitzer of the Pulitzer Prize. And that's this cartoon down here showing you both Hearst right here and Joseph Pulitzer. And they really did help champion this concept of yellow journalism. And this is an example over here of yellow journalism. This is for the Spanish American War, and they're talking about when Senator Proctor went to Cuba to visit, he saw these poor, starving people. They were malnourished and horrible conditions, and it was our job to go help free Cuba from Spain. And actually, having these tactics of sensationalized journalism really helped make people more interested in foreign affairs and what our government was doing. And we kind of felt that plight. We still have that today. You see it all the time in the news when they're talking about all these events and things like that happening across the world, starvation or mass disasters or wars. And we get involved that way. Politicians also were big fans of imperialization. A lot of the Republicans during the late 1800s were very aligned with business leaders, and they wanted to help support those business leaders finding new markets in foreign countries. So I gave you a picture here of the 1896 campaign poster where they're saying our promises have been kept. Here's President McKinley and Vice President Teddy Roosevelt. And they're showing how they have helped these industries and places like that get up and running. Congressional leader Henry Cabot Lodge, who's this person right here, he's also a huge expansionist, and he's going to play a pivotal role in US politics during this time period of working overseas. And then military power. We needed to increase our military strength and power after the Civil War, and we do just that. So we do become a naval power. And I gave you this poster down here from Puck Magazine. This is Teddy Roosevelt and his Great White Fleet. Here's Olympia riding it with, her war hawks and things like that. And this becomes the strongest navy in the world over time. So Congress starts financing the building of these steel ships, and they took the Pacific Islands like America Samoa, the Philippines, Guam, Hawaii, and they wanted them to be refueling stations so we could have better access to Asia and the markets in Asia. Because remember, at this time, we are involved in China, and Japan's just opening its doors to us as well. By 1900, the United States had the third largest navy in the world. And then, like I said, Teddy Roosevelt builds the Great White Fleet, which is that